Our first reading is from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 1 through 5. Hear, everyone who thirsts, come to my waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your earnings for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen, so that you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. See, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and a commander for the peoples. Now you shall call nations that you do not know, and nations that do not know you shall run to you, because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Our gospel reading for today is Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21, the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. Now, when Jesus heard this being the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. And when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." And Jesus said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit on the grass. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, beside women and children. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You know, when people are telling stories about things that happened to them or things that they witnessed, the details are rarely 100% accurate. In fact, it seems that there is an inversely proportionate relationship between people who have to get the details super right and how much we actually enjoy hearing those stories. Was it 5 loaves or 4? It was 5. It was definitely 5. Yes, I remember because we had to go and slice the bread, and then they go on and on. Imagine if the disciples took the time to count exactly how many people were on the hillside. On the other hand, someone can be a great storyteller, but we know that when it comes to the details, they are probably a little bit off. Someone I know is like that. I won't say her name to protect her privacy, but my wife, when she's telling a story, forget about the details, how many were there, how long it took. Jesus may as well have fed 15,000 with a few crackers and some tuna fish. But it would be a great story. She's a great storyteller. Matthew, in our gospel, is not all that interested in exactly how many people were there. In the next chapter, more people are fed, and Matthew calls it many more than 4,000. He doesn't really care about those details as much. What Matthew cares about is that we care about what Jesus cared about. What Matthew cares about is that we care about what Jesus cared about. There's a Presbyterian minister and professor named Matt Skinner, and he writes that there are a lot of things that we can learn about Jesus from this passage. Things like his ministry priorities, his reputation, his connections with John the Baptist, and the socio-political climate of the time. We can learn about all those things from just this passage. Earlier in Matthew, Jesus launches his public ministry when he learns that John the Baptist has been arrested. And at one point, in Matthew chapter 11, John reaches out from his incarceration to seek clarity from Jesus. He says, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect somebody else?" Jesus responds by calling attention to what he has done to benefit the poor and those who contend with physical ailments. Now, why would Matthew make sure to include these things that Jesus said in an answer to such a simple question? Maybe it's because we have to know what is on Jesus' mind. So then, as we heard in our passage, Jesus learns that John has been executed. Repeated references to the persecution of John reminds us of the danger of prophetic action and speech. If John can be executed for political reasons, then it could be the same for Jesus, who keeps spreading hope and joy among those who suffer and live in poverty. Jesus has good reason, then, to lay low for a while, or at least to tend to his own spirit in solitude. Our passage says that Jesus responded to the news by withdrawing to a solitary place. We don't know the reasons that Jesus wanted to withdraw. Was it because he thought that he should lay low for a while, let the political fervor die down? Was it to tend to his grief, do a little self-care? We don't know. Matthew doesn't say. Those details aren't as important to him. And anyway, whatever the reason that Jesus withdrew, it didn't work. The plan fails. Crowds pursue him, with some even going ahead and gathering at his destination before he can even come ashore. Maybe some of those people are trying to protect Jesus from the authorities. Let's go ahead so that we can scope out the land, make sure that nobody is there to harm him. Maybe others have come because they've heard and they seek healing from their ailments. For Jesus, though, the human need always outweighs other concerns. Jesus' compassion seizes his body and prompts him to heal. So much for carving out some time for self-care. Instead, Jesus feels compassion, and his compassion compels him to act. He knows that God takes delight in providing sustenance, food given without price, as Isaiah said. So when he feels compassion, he gives without price. He feeds the hungry. But he also knows about enlisting others in the toil and the joy of offering food to people who are hungry. This meal isn't going to descend from the heavens. It's going to be made and passed around by human hands. In other words, whenever Jesus feels compassion for those who are disadvantaged in harm's way, he acts and he calls others to act. We would have a different story here if Jesus were to instruct the crowds to come forward decently and in order and take the loaves and the fish from a central distribution point. We'll call your row when it's time. It would also be different still if plates magically appeared in front of the people as they were sitting on the hillside. But instead, the disciples distribute the food. looking again and again into the hopeful and delighted eyes as they move from one hungry person to the next. Compassion compelling them to act together. I also love that this meal in the desert is about more than just survival. It's a feast. Everyone eats until filled, it says in verse 20, not just the bare minimum. So often, giving to the poor was giving things that we ourselves didn't want. We give the bare minimum, the leftovers. In this story, it's the disciples who seem to be given the leftovers at the end, which they have to gather themselves. The service was one of abundance. The abundance speaks to the depth of Jesus' compassion. It also gives us insight into his state of mind. Jesus acted in the face of the danger that was before him. Food shortages were common in that area in the Roman Empire, just like they are here. And authorities in the Roman Empire actually liked it that way, a way to control, to keep order, to let the residents know who was in charge. And so these officials knew the political danger of food giveaways, assistance programs. Someone who's able to feed the masses in a desolate place can give hope to those masses, not something the government appreciated. There was real danger in Jesus' choice to feed the hungry here. And so while we may not know exactly how many people were fed, by exactly how many loaves and exactly how many fishes and how long it took, what we do know is what was on Jesus' mind and what he felt in his heart: compassion and courage. The word for compassion in this story, when it says that he felt compassion, it means to be deeply moved in your guts by the pain of another. To be deeply moved in your body. Stories like the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, all stories that featured this particular word for compassion. It's something that you feel. It might be an illustration of the difference between sympathy and empathy. To have sympathy is to feel another's pain. Empathy, though, might be to feel your own pain alongside another. These are actually just my own observations, and my name is not Webster or Oxford. What is definitely true, though, is that when the gospel writers use this word, it is to denote a powerful bodily experience of compassion. Jesus literally feels the hunger pangs of those who came. He doesn't conceive of their pain in his mind, which may have allowed him to ignore it, to sort of think of something else, to pray, to withdraw, to escape the unpleasant thoughts. Instead, he feels it in his body, in his heart, in his lungs, in his stomach, in his kidneys and liver, all of the organs that came to be known as the seat of affection. He feels their pain and he can't ignore it. Not because he is the Son of God, but because he is a human being. And he acts decisively, despite the danger posed by his political enemies. Compassion with courage. And so, as we ourselves prepare to celebrate the feast, let this passage remind us that hungry people are not metaphors. They're not thought exercises. They're not ideas that we can wrestle with. They're real. Real people who are hungry. Hunger is real, and it is persistent. And so this story reminds us that our own compassion must not grow tired. It must not be thought about, but felt. And courage must then rule our decisions in the face of our neighbor's hunger. Courage, like Jesus, must not be imagined, but acted on. We want the courage and compassion that Jesus showed in this story. The women and men and children followed Jesus when they were hungry, and he fed them. They suffered, and Jesus suffered with them. May God help us to do the same. Amen.